They carved a drainage trench through the heart of my land. So I answered by driving a road right across theirs and dragging the HOA that ordered it into court. You ever wake up one morning and realize someone decided your property is just extra space on their map? The first warning wasn't an email, a letter, or a knock at the door. It was a crooked line of neon survey flags, glowing orange against my winter pasture, like someone had taken a highlighter to my life. They marched across the south end of my field, straight through the slope I'd spent years shaping so water would run gently toward the creek. For a minute, I told myself it was a prank, or a mistake, or something the county would straighten out by lunchtime. But the longer I stared, coffee cooling in my hand, the more one thought settled in my gut. Those stakes were on my side of the line. My land. My past 14 years of busted knuckles, late payments, and prayers over seed catalogs. No one had called. No one had knocked. No one had asked. I live out here alone on purpose. 22 years in uniform. 2 tours that still visit me on cold nights. 1 marriage that didn't survive the silence afterward, and a spine that complains every time a cold front rolls off the mountains. I bought this 110-acre patch of western North Carolina to raise soybeans, keep bees, and listen to wind in the pines instead of sirens. I paid for dark soil, clean water, and a view no cul-de-sac brochure can print without lying. I did not sign up for a homeowners association, but the old dairy farm to the west did. It sold. Then it split. Overnight, the ridge beyond my fence sprouted beige boxes with fake shutters and names that sounded like scented candles. Willow Creek, Fox Hollow, Sunrise Meadows. And with those houses came rules, newsletters, committees, and an HOA board that believed every inch of land they could see belonged to their community vision. For a while, they left me alone. I was the weird farmer on the edge of their brochure. Background decoration. Then one morning they stopped pretending I was invisible. I called the Sunrise Meadows office, knuckles white on the phone. After a dozen rings, a chipper voice finally answered. Dana. The kind of woman who smiles while telling you your account is in collections. Yes, there is some planned infrastructure work, she said. It's all coordinated with the city. It'll help with regional water flow. It's very exciting. Funny, I said. Nobody told the guy who actually owns the field you've planted flags in. She cleared her throat. Oh, well, technically you're outside the subdivision footprint. This is bigger than just your parcel. It benefits everyone. Everyone. That's HOA code for everyone we care about. I hung up before I used the kind of language that would have made my drill sergeant proud. The next day, the flags multiplied like a rash. By afternoon, a white SUV with the Sunrise Meadows logo rolled up just past my fence. 2 men climbed out in iron polo shirts and identical clipboards, pointing at my barn like they were already pricing it on a spreadsheet. I walked down the hill fast enough to kick up dust. Who told you you could park on my side of the world? The tall one gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This strip is part of the Sunrise Drainage Initiative. Floodplain maps changed. We're correcting the flow path. Correction, I said. Maps don't magic up an easement. This is private property. My name's on the deed. The shorter one shrugged. You might want to check the new filing, sir. Things move quickly around here. They left tire tracks on my drive and arrogance in the air. That night, I spread my deed and the old zoning map across the kitchen table, highlighters squeaking as I traced my boundary line. Every orange flag I'd seen earlier sat inside that yellow border like an invading army. My grandfather's rule rang in my head. Keep it in writing, especially with neighbors. First thing the next morning, I called county zoning. A young guy named Kevin ran every search he could. "I don't see anything that puts a canal on your land," he said. "The HOA has an application for something called Irrigation Channel 4B, but the sketch stops right at your fence." "Stamp date?" I asked. "3 days ago." So they were hammering flags into my soil before the ink on their paperwork was even dry. 3 mornings later, the ground itself answered my questions. That sound, engines at dawn, hits different when you've slept in tents beside convoys. I jolted awake, grabbed yesterday's jeans, and made it to the porch before the second gear change. 4 yellow machines crouched at the edge of my pasture. One excavator, one backhoe, 2 dump trucks. Men in hard hats ate breakfast sandwiches, leaning on their equipment and pointing at those cursed orange flags like it was open season on my life. I sprinted down the hill. "Shut it down. This is private property." The backhoe operator climbed down, flipping through a crumpled work order. "Got authorization from the HOA. Pre-cleared section." Pre-cleared by who? He stared at the ink like it might answer for him. "Client says it's all good." 15 minutes later, the first bucket of topsoil I'd spent a decade improving, cover crops, manure, careful rotation, dumped into a truck like trash. By noon, a raw trench scarred across my field, aimed straight for the gate where my cattle trail started. That night, I walked the cut in the dark with a headlamp and a surveyor's wheel, writing distances in a beat-up notebook while frogs screamed from the creek. If they were drawing a line through my life, I was going to know exactly where it ran. The following morning, the rumble came back louder. I stumbled to the window and froze. They hadn't just returned. They multiplied. This time, there were 3 bulldozers and a flatbed unloading concrete culvert sections like we were building an interstate instead of butchering a farm. 8 workers in reflective vests stomped across my pasture, my "no trespassing" signs ignored like lawn decor. I skipped the coffee, grabbed my phone, and hit record. Pajama pants, barn boots, breath clouding in the cold. "Who told you to come back?" I yelled. Most of them didn't even glance at me. Eventually, a young guy with a trimmed beard and a clipboard walked over like he'd drawn the short straw. "Sir, we are on a scheduled continuation for the community canal. You were notified." "I was notified of nothing," I said. "My deed says this is mine." "You're trespassing again." He gave me a smirk that made my fingers itch. "We were told this strip is under utility easement pending final approval." "Pending approval isn't ownership," I said. "And that ditch is slicing through my crop residue." That's when I saw the real damage. Yesterday's 4-foot scrape had become a 7-foot wide, 6-foot deep concrete channel, angled and reinforced so no tractor, no plow, no irrigation rig could ever cross it unaided. It ran diagonally through the only gravel lane sturdy enough for hay wagons, the one my late father-in-law and I had built one shovel at a time. Now it was sliced like a severed nerve. Everything beyond the cut, livestock paddock, young orchard, equipment shed, was an island. This wasn't drainage. It was a moat. And moats say one thing: whoever dug them doesn't expect you to fight back. I demanded their supervisor's name. They gave me Brad Whitmore and a cell number that went straight to voicemail. My message could have chilled a beer. "Mark Whitmore, this is Miles, owner of the farm your project is chewing through. You have until 10 a.m. to call me back. After that, I'm calling the sheriff, the county, the state environmental office, and every reporter between here and Asheville. Your clock starts now." Then I dialed the sheriff. The dispatcher went quiet when I said, "Unpermitted canal on working farmland. That's not how this is supposed to work," she said. "I'll send a deputy." Deputy Carson rolled in just after 9, tall, tired, and clearly done with everyone's nonsense. I handed him a laminated copy of my deed and a travel mug. He studied the canal, then the machines, then the HOA logo on the work order. "They claim temporary construction access under some zoning overlay," he said. "Is that even real?" "Not without paperwork tied to your parcel. I'll file a report and push it to the county attorney. But unless they're about to crush somebody, this is civil." Translation: more paper, more time, more money. He gave me a look that said he hated it as much as I did, then drove off. The dozers never missed a beat. I walked back to the edge of that trench. The soil exposed in the cut was dark and rich, the kind farmers dream about. Years of care, piled in ugly heaps in the backs of trucks headed who knows where. The channel curved toward the tree line, then down the slope behind the subdivision. Suddenly, I saw it clearly. It emptied right into the creek that fed both my lower fields and their manicured retention ponds. They weren't just redirecting water, they were stealing my flood protection so their basements stayed dry. That night, I didn't eat. I went hunting for their weak spot. I sweet-talked an old clerk into staying late while we pulled every Sunrise Meadows filing from the last 3 years. Overlays, concept plans, change requests. When the stack finally stopped growing, the pattern was simple. 0 easements crossing my line, 0 condemnation orders, 0 written permission from me. Just one shiny concept drawing that stopped politely at my fence, pretending my farm didn't exist. They weren't confused. They were gambling. I printed 4 full sets of everything. One for me, one for whatever lawyer I could afford, one for zoning, one to hand deliver to Mr. Whitmore with a note that might as well have said, "See you in front of a judge." The next morning, a blue envelope sat tucked into my gate. No stamp, no return address, just the Sunrise Meadows crest, and my name typed like a court summons. Inside was a single, expensive sheet. Community Infrastructure Notice. Phase 1 Waterway Project. Paragraphs of corporate poetry about regional hydrological resilience, proactive neighborhood solutions, and stability for Sunrise Meadows and adjacent residential corridors. Adjacent. That's what my life had become to them. An appendix on their golf cart kingdom. At the bottom, underlined, "Your cooperation is appreciated in the public interest." Public interest, my ass. 30 minutes later, I parked in front of their HOA office. A fake cottage with plastic flowers in window boxes, and a brass plaque about building community. I walked straight past reception. Dana, the phone voice, saw me, and her smile died mid-syllable. "I need to see whoever thinks they get to tunnel through my pasture," I said. Right on cue, the back door opened. In stepped a man who looked like he ironed his smile. Tan, perfect teeth, navy blazer, sunglasses perched in his hair like he just stepped off a boat. "Ma, Garrison," he said, reaching out a hand. What a surprise. I looked at the hand and let it hang. "Save it. You know exactly why I'm here." I dropped the blue envelope on the counter between us. "This little letter says I'm supposed to clap while you carve through my farm." He skimmed it like it was a takeout menu. It's hardly carving, Miles. The canal is part of a comprehensive water management strategy. We're partnering with the city. Long-term sustainability. You're partnered with no one, I said. I checked every record this county keeps. There isn't a single approved easement touching my land. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Gone in a heartbeat. Paperwork lags behind reality sometimes. Our council assures us we're within our rights to handle overflow. Surely, as a veteran, you understand sacrificing for the greater good. There it was. He tried to wrap my service around my throat and pull. I stepped closer until I could smell his cologne over the air freshener. Don't use my uniform as a prop in your sales pitch. Duty is what you do when nobody sees you, not sending bulldozers onto a man's land before the sun's even up because your designer lungs can't handle a thunderstorm. Dana shrank behind the desk. Brad's smile tightened. We are prepared to offer compensation, he said. Not cash, of course, but our landscaping crew could maintain your property line. Complimentary weed control. Maybe an honorary seat on the architectural committee. I actually laughed. You split my farm in half and offer me free lawn care. He lowered his voice like we were closing a deal. The project is nearly complete. Undoing it now would be costly for everyone. Something old and cold settled behind my ribs. You're about to learn what costly really means, I said, and walked out. That night, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were my discharge papers, a folded flag, field-scarred binoculars, and at the bottom, a manual I never thought I'd crack again. The Army Corps of Engineers book on land and waterways. Pages full of rules about artificial channels and private property. One line lit up like a warning flare. Building water structures on private land without permission or compensation can trigger federal trouble. So I called a friend, Russ, former squad mate, now a regulator with the state environmental office. I sent him drone photos and one text. Tell me if this canal is legal. His reply came in minutes. Miles, that's an unpermitted lateral ditch in active farmland. That's a textbook violation. Want me to open a case? Yes, I wrote, while Brad slept peacefully under his vaulted ceiling. I started digging a different kind of trench, one made of paperwork, statutes, and evidence. By the end of the week, their canal ran the entire length of my eastern boundary. Concrete walls, culverts at both ends, green spray seed that smelled more like chemicals than grass. Grayish water flowed steadily, reeking faintly of chlorine and cut turf. Saturday morning, I fired up my tractor to mow the orchard beyond the channel. I reached the spot where my old gravel lane used to cross and slammed the brakes so hard I almost went over the steering wheel. There was nothing, no ramp, no bridge, just a sharp concrete drop and filthy water moving fast enough to pull down anything smaller than a truck. A child's toy wheel bobbed past, followed by a soggy box and what looked like half a bag of fertilizer. My fence line now dangled above open water. I couldn't rebuild it without an engineer and permits I didn't ask for. My own farm had been split into two pieces I couldn't reach without hiking a mile over rock. Later that day, I slipped on clay, twisted my ankle hard enough to see stars, and sat in the mud thinking one clear thought. They had turned my land into a puzzle. I was going to redraw the picture. That night, with ice on my ankle and my old farm notebook open, I sketched the canal as it lay. Every bend, every foot of encroachment. Then I drew my farm the way it used to be. Paths, trails, irrigation lines, one narrow spot where their trench crossed my original gravel trail glowed on the page like a target, a choke point, a weakness. If they could carve a line through my acreage, I could build over theirs. Sunday morning, I rented a compact track loader with a blade and a backhoe arm, paid in cash. No questions asked. I spent the day clearing brush and staking out that choke point. Mason string level, grade checks. Every move documented. If they wanted a fight about structures, I'd give them one built by the book. Monday, I started hauling gravel. A buddy from an old quarry job cut me a deal on Crusher Run. Load after load, I dumped, spread, and packed until the gap above their canal turned into a firm ramp. I laid pipe to handle runoff, braced the sides with salvaged timbers, and kept measuring like Russ was looking over my shoulder. Tuesday afternoon, familiar tires crunched on my drive. The HOA SUV again. Brad climbed out with a younger man in tow. Both stared at the growing mound of gravel like I'd parked a tank across their sidewalk. Planning a driveway to nowhere? Brad called. I'm rebuilding access to the half of my farm your project cut off, I said. He folded his arms. You're obstructing a permitted community water feature that could be considered vandalism. Permitted by who? I asked. Because the county still doesn't show a single signed approval that touches my land. His jaw tightened. There are procedures, Mr. Garrison. There are also laws, I said. I've read the ones that matter. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket and held it up. Temporary agricultural crossing authorization. Filed this morning. Signed, stamped, and recorded. It acknowledges your trench and gives me the right to cross it. He stared at the seal like it personally offended him. You're bluffing, he said. I don't gamble on paperwork, I replied. The SUV spun gravel on its way back to the subdivision. I went back to work. By Wednesday evening, I had a rough but solid road arcing over their canal, a raised spine of packed stone wide enough for my heaviest equipment. When I drove the loader across it for the first time, something unclenched deep inside. For the first time since the flags appeared, I could reach my own land again without limping over rocks. Real ownership is the distance between your boots and your boundaries. I knew they weren't done. Neither was I. Their next move wasn't a bulldozer. It was a lawsuit. An HOA lawyer from the city filed for an emergency injunction to force me to tear down my unauthorized crossing. They called my road a hazard, an eyesore, a threat to their shiny canal. My attorney, Harriet, a former city lawyer who treats rogue HO as like sport, answered with something much heavier. Months of drone footage, soil tests from the contaminated water, my temporary crossing permit, and an affidavit from Russ stating my road exceeded state standards for secondary farm access. Court day came. I put on my cleanest jeans and the old army jacket I swore I'd never wear again. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and nerves. Across the aisle, Brad sat stiff in a suit that probably cost more than my tractor. Karen, the HOA vice president, in a pink blazer, hovered behind him, clutching a designer purse like a shield. Their attorney went first. He talked about community safety, stormwater management, and how my reckless obstruction put families at risk. He showed photos of my road with red arrows and dramatic captions about erosion and collapse. Then Harriet stood, and for the first time, the HOA had to watch their own actions from my side of the fence. On the big screen, we showed their machines crossing my boundary at sunrise, GPS coordinates glowing in the corner. Their workers walking beside my beehives. Concrete pouring into a channel that cut 30 feet into my deed line. Next came the lab reports, listing pesticides and chemicals in the canal water at levels that would choke a field. Then my survey map, with my boundary in black and their canal traced in bright red far inside it. Harriet's voice never rose. The association dug an unapproved sewer through an active farm, poisoned his water, and then sued when he built a safe, documented crossing to reach his own property, she said. The judge turned to the HOA table. Do you have a recorded easement, a condemnation order, or signed permission from Mr. Garrison? Their lawyer shuffled papers. We have pending applications, he offered. That is not what I asked, the judge said. Finally, no, Your Honor. She looked at me. You built this road afterwards? Yes, ma'am, I said, after screaming at bulldozers and getting ignored. She leaned forward. There is no good intentions exception to trespass, she said to the HOA. You don't get to carve into someone's land because your lawn gets soggy. The canal is unlawful. The road he built to reach his own fields is not. Gavel. Motion denied. The request to tear down my road evaporated. Court costs to the HOA. Bullies hate paperwork almost as much as they hate losing in public. Out in the hallway, a reporter shoved a mic in my face. How does it feel to beat the HOA? He asked. I looked past him at the mountains. Feels like getting my land back, one document at a time. That should have been the end. But bullies rarely quit politely. They tried pressure at the property line next. A new sign appeared near my road. Warning: unapproved structure obstructing community channel. Cease all activity. Printed on cheap paper in a plastic sleeve, fluttering in the wind like it already knew it was a joke. I drove over it, literally. Days later, Karen herself marched out to my crossing in that famous pink blazer, heels stabbing my gravel like she owned the mineral rights. You are trespassing, I said, hands on the loader's wheel. She whipped off her sunglasses. No, you are. This entire pile of rocks violates our stormwater covenants. You're endangering children and elderly residents. Your rules stop at your curb, I said. This side of the canal is my deed, not your newsletter. You move that machine 1 inch, she snapped, and I will have you arrested. So I called Deputy Carson on speaker. He sighed when he heard my name. Tell me you're not round 3 miles. Got Mrs. Karen Delaney standing in front of my legally recognized farm road, threatening to arrest me, I said. Ma'am, Carson's voice boomed over the speaker. You're standing on parcel 17A. The court affirmed that road. You have zero authority there. Leave, or I send a unit to walk you back. Karen went pale, then scarlet. She stomped across the canal, heels sinking in the dirt, and shouted, You've made an enemy today. No, ma'am, I said. I built a road. That should have warned them this wasn't going to fade quietly. Once regulators started showing up with clipboards and cameras, the board finally understood this wasn't just a cranky farmer problem. It was fines, possible criminal referrals, and headlines. State officers inspected the canal, measured every inch of encroachment, and gave Sunrise Meadows 30 days to rip every piece of concrete out of my parcel or start writing $1,000 checks daily. The HOA fired back with one more cease and desist to me, demanding I remove my crossing. Harriet responded by upgrading our side to a full civil suit, restoration, damages, and every cost I could prove. News picked up the story. A local paper ran a front-page article. Farmer fights HOA over illegal canal. builds his own road. My muddy boots ended up on websites, on a radio show, even in a subreddit someone started just to track the case. Neighbors I'd never met started stopping by with coffee, fence posts, stories about their own property battles. One retired Marine clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're not just fighting for your farm, brother. You're fighting for the line." The final hearing felt less like a quiet dispute and more like a referendum. Courtroom. It was packed. Farmers in clean work shirts, HOA residents who looked like they hoped no one recognized them. Cameras, notepads, stickers that read, "Respect the line," slapped onto hats and coffee cups. The judge this time was known for quoting the state constitution from memory, especially the parts about property rights. Harriet laid it all out. The trespass, the damage, the poison runoff, the lost yield, the emergency gravel and concrete, the legal bills, the cost to repair the soil. Russ testified that the canal violated environmental law while my road exceeded state specs. The HOA's attorneys tried one last time to paint themselves as heroes saving children from floods. The judge listened, then asked the same three questions she always asked: easement, condemnation order, written permission. Three no answers, no way out. She ruled in my favor. Full restoration of my land, tens of thousands in damages. A court order forcing the HOA to tear out every piece of their canal on my side and replace the soil under state supervision. And Brad himself had to show up at the job site every day until it was done. No delegating, no hiding. Gavel. Case closed. 2 weeks later, the machines came back, but they were finally on my side. Backhoes ripped up culverts instead of installing them. Dump trucks hauled concrete fragments out instead of dumping them in. The brown scar of the canal slowly disappeared under fresh soil and seed. Brad stood at the edge of my field each morning, hands in his pockets, watching his grand vision get dismantled one bucket at a time. He looked like a man attending his own ribbon cutting for failure. Kelsey, the state officer overseeing the work, drank coffee on my road while we watched. "They assumed you'd roll over," she said. "They always do, until somebody doesn't." By New Year's, the channel on my side was gone, just a raised, healing seam of earth where concrete used to glare in the sun. I seeded it thick with clover and ryegrass to hold the soil until spring. The road I built over their mistake stayed solid, legal, mine. Spring brought more than green. It brought people. A neighbor from the subdivision showed up with his young son and 2 apple saplings to plant where their machines had snapped my old trees. A retired nurse carried blackberry starts and said she'd always hated the chlorine stink of the canal. Mail carriers, teenagers, old farmers, they all took turns resetting fence posts along the recovering line. What the HOA meant as a barrier had become a bridge. Project Line Walker was born one evening in my barn, in front of an old projector and a whitewash wall. We gathered landowners who'd been pushed, tricked, or intimidated. I showed them my plats, my drone footage, my file folders, my road specs. Russ video called in and explained which regulations HOAs prayed no one would ever read. We weren't building a mob. We were building a toolbox. Now, once a month, the barn fills with maps and questions. People bring screenshots, survey stakes, and stories full of the same quiet anger I felt when I first saw those orange flags. We teach them how to document, how to speak in the language courts listen to, how to stand on the line without getting dragged off it. Kids ride their bikes over the road in the evenings. Wildflowers fill in the shoulders. A small carved sign hangs on one of the corner posts now. Someone put it up at night when I wasn't looking. It says, "Here's where they pushed. Here's where he stayed." Every morning, I drive that stretch of gravel and concrete to check the bees and cattle. Every evening, I drive it back, and every single time, I remember the lesson written in those ruts. You don't need to shout to be stubborn. You just have to refuse to move off your rightful ground. If this story lit even a small fire in you, hit like, share it with someone fighting their own HOA, and help Winds of Thought and HOA board members keep telling stories for the people holding their lines in the dirt.